They thought she was a nobody. For 3 years, Isabel scrubbed their floors, cooked their meals, and tolerated their sneers, all for the sake of a husband who wouldn't even look her in the eye. But this Christmas, the Sterling family went too far. In the middle of a lavish dinner at their Aspen estate, with snow falling gently outside, they didn't just hand her a gift, they handed her divorce papers. They laughed, thinking they had discarded a broken woman. They didn't know that the phone in her pocket connected her to the most powerful man in New York. One call was all it took to turn their winter wonderland into a frozen hell. This is the story of how the prey became the predator. The scent of roasting goose and caramelized chestnuts filled the air, rich and heavy, masking the suffocating tension that had gripped the Sterling estate for the last 3 days. Outside, the aspen snow was falling in thick, cinematic flakes, coating the long, winding driveway of the Winter Palace, as the Sterling family pompously called their holiday home, in a pristine layer of white. Inside, however, things were far less pure. Isabel wiped a bead of sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand, careful not to smudge the flour on her cheek. She wasn't the hired help. She was the wife of the eldest son, Richard Sterling. Yet, here she was, standing in the industrial-sized kitchen, wearing an apron over her simple grey dress, while the actual catering staff looked at her with a mix of pity and confusion. "Mrs. Sterling, please," the head chef, a kind man named Gordon, whispered. "We can handle the glazing. You should be out there with the guests. It's Christmas Eve." Isabel offered a tight, fragile smile. "It's fine, Gordon. You know Victoria likes the glaze done a specific way. If it's too sweet, she'll send the whole bird back. I'd rather just do it myself than hear the shouting." Gordon nodded solemnly. Everyone knew about Victoria Sterling's temper. She was the matriarch of the Sterling shipping dynasty, a woman who wore diamonds like armor and treated kindness like a weakness. To her, Isabel was nothing more than a stain on the family tapestry, a mistake Richard had made during a rebellious phase 3 years ago. Isabel had been a library archivist when they met, quiet and bookish. Victoria had never forgiven her for being common. Isabel finished the glaze and washed her hands, the cold water biting at her red, chapped skin. She untied the apron, revealing a modest dress that she had bought at a department store outlet. It was clean and elegant, but compared to the couture gowns worn by the women in the other room, it might as well have been a burlap sack. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. "Just get through tonight," she told herself. Richard promised things would change next year. He promised we'd move out of the guest cottage. He promised. She pushed through the swinging doors and entered the dining hall. The room was a spectacle of wealth. A 20-foot spruce tree dominated the corner, laden with baccarat crystal ornaments and twinkling fairy lights. The long mahogany table was set for 12, gleaming with silver cutlery and vintage china that cost more than most people's cars. At the head of the table sat Victoria, holding a flute of champagne. She was laughing at something a guest had said, her head thrown back, exposing the long, cruel line of her throat. Richard sat to her right, looking handsome in his bespoke tuxedo, but his eyes were darting around the room nervously. When Isabel entered, the conversation didn't stop, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Victoria's eyes snapped toward her, scanning Isabel from head to toe with a look of undisguised disdain. "Finally," Victoria drawled, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "We were worried you'd fallen into the oven, Isabel, though I suppose that would have improved the smell." A ripple of polite, cruel laughter went around the table. "I was just ensuring the dinner was prepared to your liking, Victoria," Isabel said, her voice steady, though her hands trembled by her sides. "Sit down," Richard mumbled, not looking at her. He gestured vaguely to the empty chair at the far end of the table, the spot usually reserved for children or unwanted relatives. It was as far away from him as possible. Isabel took her seat. Next to her was Beatrice, Richard's younger sister, who was currently busy taking a selfie with her new Cartier bracelet. Beatrice didn't even acknowledge Isabel's presence, merely shifting her shoulder to block Isabel from the frame. "So," began a man sitting across from Victoria, Mr. Harrington, a banking executive with a face like a bulldog. "Richard tells me the merger is going through next month. Big things for Sterling Shipping, eh?" "Massive," Richard said, puffing out his chest. "We're looking at acquiring the North Atlantic routes. It's going to double our valuation." "And it's all thanks to strategic alliances," Victoria interrupted, her eyes gleaming. She took a slow sip of her drink. "Family is everything in business, isn't it? Who you marry determines your future." Isabel felt a knot form in her stomach. This was a common refrain of Victoria's, a jab she liked to throw at Isabel whenever possible. But tonight, there was a different weight to it, a malicious anticipation. "Speaking of alliances," Victoria continued, setting her glass down with a definitive clink, "we have a surprise guest joining us for dessert. Someone very special. Richard, tell them." Richard cleared his throat, his face flushing slightly. He finally glanced at Isabel, but his eyes were dead, void of any warmth. "Yes, we've invited Charlotte Kensington." Isabel froze. Charlotte Kensington, the daughter of the senator. The woman Victoria had always wanted Richard to marry. The woman Richard had dated before he met Isabel. "She's in Aspen?" Isabel asked, her voice barely a whisper. "She's staying in the guest wing," Beatrice chirped up, smirking. "She arrived an hour ago. She's just freshening up. She brought the most gorgeous gifts for everyone." Isabel looked at Richard. "You invited your ex-girlfriend to stay with us? On Christmas Eve?" "It's business, Isabel," Richard snapped, his tone defensive. "Her father is crucial for the merger. Don't be childish." "Childish?" Isabel gripped the tablecloth. "I've been cooking for your family for 3 days. I've taken the verbal abuse, the cold shoulders, the isolation, and now you invite her here?" "Oh, stop the melodrama." Victoria waved a hand dismissively. "You're embarrassing yourself. Honestly, Isabel, you never did know how to behave in high society. You're too emotional, too fragile." The doors to the dining hall opened again, but it wasn't the servers with the food. It was a tall, blonde woman wearing a shimmering red gown that looked like it was woven from liquid rubies. Charlotte Kensington walked in like she owned the place. "Merry Christmas, everyone," she announced, her voice bubbling with confidence. Richard stood up immediately, something he hadn't done when Isabel entered. "Charlotte, you look stunning." Isabel felt the walls closing in. The humiliation was total. She was the wife, yet she was seated at the kids' spot while her husband fawned over another woman. But as she looked around the table, she realized something terrifying. None of them looked surprised. They were all smiling. This wasn't an unexpected drop-in. This was an ambush. The dinner service began, but for Isabel, the food tasted like ash. The conversation flowed around her like a river around a stone. Charlotte had taken the seat to Richard's left, a seat that had been mysteriously kept empty until now. She laughed at his jokes, touched his arm, and shared inside stories about their college days in Switzerland. Isabel sat in silence, dissecting the roasted goose she had spent hours preparing. Every bite was a reminder of her servitude. "Isabel," Charlotte said suddenly, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. "This goose is delicious. Did you make it? I heard you're quite domestic. It's so quaint." like a little 1950s housewife. I enjoy cooking, Isabel said stiffly. Of course you do, Victoria interjected. It's good to have hobbies, especially when one doesn't have a career or a lineage. Mr. Harrington chuckled. Now, Victoria, not everyone comes from old money. True, Victoria smiled, her eyes cold. Some people are just meant to be background characters, support staff. Isabel dropped her fork. It clattered loudly against the china, silencing the room. I'm not support staff, Victoria. I'm your son's wife. The silence that followed was heavy, pregnant with doom. Victoria slowly turned her head toward Isabel. The amusement was gone from her face, replaced by a look of sheer calculation. Are you? Victoria asked softly. Richard shifted in his seat. He took a large gulp of wine. Mother, maybe we should wait until after dessert. No, Victoria said firmly. We do this now, before the pudding. I won't have my Christmas ruined by pretense. She reached under the table and pulled out a thick manila envelope. She slid it across the mahogany surface. It spun slowly, coming to a stop right in front of Isabel's plate. Isabel stared at it. What is this? Open it, Richard said, his voice cracking. He refused to look at her. He was staring at the candle flame in front of him, a coward hiding in the light. Isabel's hands shook as she opened the envelope. She pulled out the document on top. The bold letters at the top of the page screamed at her. Petition for dissolution of marriage. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The chatter of the fire, the clinking of glasses, the snow falling outside, it all faded into a buzzing white noise. Divorce papers? Isabel whispered. She looked up, her eyes wide with shock. Richard? What is this? It's over, Isabel, Richard said, finally looking at her. His eyes were hard, fortified by his mother's presence. It hasn't been working for a long time. You don't fit in. You never have. We were just talking about a vacation next month, Isabel stammered, trying to make sense of the madness. You said you loved me last week. I was trying to be kind, Richard said, his voice devoid of emotion. But the merger, the family, I need a partner who can stand beside me, someone who understands this world. He glanced at Charlotte, who offered him a sympathetic, knowing smile. You're leaving me for business? Isabel asked, tears welling in her eyes. For money? It's not just money, dear, Victoria said, leaning forward. It's breeding, let's be honest. You're a librarian's daughter from Ohio. You have no connections, no assets. You bring nothing to this table but sentimental clutter. Victoria gestured to the papers. We've been generous. There's a settlement. $50,000. Enough to get you a nice little apartment somewhere far away. Maybe back in Ohio. You can start over. Find a nice mechanic or a school teacher. Someone on your level. 50,000? Isabel laughed, a sudden sharp sound that startled Beatrice. Richard, we've been married 3 years. I supported you when you lost the Asian contract. I nursed you when you broke your leg skiing. I handled your mother's press scandals. And you were compensated with a roof over your head and clothes on your back, Victoria snapped. Sign the papers, Isabel. Don't make a scene. It's Christmas. And if I don't? Isabel asked, her voice dropping. Victoria smiled, a shark baring its teeth. Then we release the photos. Isabel blinked. What photos? Beatrice giggled and pulled out her phone. She slid it across the table. On the screen was a blurry photo of Isabel talking to a man in a coffee shop. It was innocent, an old friend she had run into months ago. But the angle, the graininess, it looked intimate. It's amazing what a narrative can do, Victoria said smoothly. Adultery voids the prenup entirely. If you don't sign this amicable separation agreement and take the $50,000, we will leak this to the tabloids tomorrow morning. Gold-digging wife cheats on sterling heir. You'll be ruined. You won't get a dime, and you'll never show your face in decent society again." Isabel looked at the photo, then at Richard. "You know that's not true. That's Mark." "My cousin. Does it matter?" Richard shrugged. "The press loves a scandal, and we own the narrative, Isabel. We always do." Isabel felt a cold calm wash over her. It was the calm of someone who had hit rock bottom and found solid ground beneath the mud. She looked at Richard, the man she had loved. She looked at Victoria, the monster in diamonds. She looked at Charlotte, the replacement waiting in the wings. They thought she was weak. They thought she was poor. They thought she was alone. They were wrong. Isabel slowly closed the folder. She didn't sign it. She pushed it back toward Richard. "I won't sign," she said, quietly. "Then you leave with nothing," Victoria hissed. "Get out, now! The car is waiting to take you to the bus station. You're not welcome in this house anymore." Isabel stood up. She untied the ribbon of her dress slightly, breathing easier as the constriction loosened. She looked Victoria dead in the eye. "You're right, Victoria," Isabel said, her voice gaining strength, ringing clear through the silent dining hall. "I don't belong here. I never did. Because this house is filled with cheap, hollow people wrapped in expensive paper." "Get out!" Victoria screamed, slamming her hand on the table. "I'm going," Isabel said. She turned to Richard. "I hope the merger is worth it, Richard. I really do." She turned and walked out of the dining hall, her head held high. She didn't stop to pack. She didn't stop to change. She walked straight to the front door, grabbed her coat, and stepped out into the freezing aspen night. The heavy oak door slammed shut behind her, sealing her fate. Or so they thought. Isabel walked down the snowy steps, the cold biting at her legs. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a burner phone, an old, secure line she had promised never to use unless it was an emergency. She had kept her secret for 3 years. She had wanted to be loved for herself, not for her name. She had wanted a simple life. But the Sterlings didn't want simple. They wanted war. She dialed the number. It rang once, twice. "Hello?" A deep, gravelly voice answered. A voice that commanded boardrooms across the globe. A voice that hadn't spoken to her since she ran away to find true love. "Daddy?" Isabel said, her voice trembling just a little. "Isabel?" The voice softened instantly, shifting from tycoon to father. "Isabel, is that you? Where are you? It's Christmas." "I'm in Aspen," she said, looking back at the glowing mansion where her husband was likely proposing to another woman. "Daddy, you were right. You were right about everything." "What did they do?" The voice on the line turned dark, a low rumble of thunder. "They tried to destroy me," Isabel said, a tear finally freezing on her cheek. "They threw me out. They tried to buy me off with $50,000. There was a silence on the other end, a terrifying, heavy silence. "50,000, her father repeated, the insult palpable in his tone. "They insulted a Kincaid with $50,000? "I want them to pay, Daddy," Isabel whispered. "I want them to lose everything." "Done," Arthur Kincaid said. "Stay where you are. I'm sending the helicopter. And Isabel?" "Yes?" "By the time you land in New York, the Sterling family won't even be able to afford a bus ticket." Inside the Winter Palace, the atmosphere had shifted from tense to triumphant. With Isabel gone, it was as if a stain had been scrubbed from the floor. The air felt lighter to the Sterlings, purified of the commoner stench. Dessert was served, a decadent sticky toffee pudding with gold leaf shavings. Victoria raised her glass again. To new beginnings, she beamed, looking at Richard and Charlotte, and to the correct order of things. Richard, emboldened by the alcohol and the absence of his wife's judgmental gaze, turned to Charlotte. He reached into his tuxedo pocket and pulled out a velvet box. It wasn't the modest ring he had given Isabel 3 years ago. This was a rock, a 5-carat canary diamond that caught the candlelight and threw it back in dazzling shards. "Charlotte," Richard said, his voice smooth, "we wasted years apart. Let's not waste any more. Will you?" A sharp, discordant buzzing sound cut through the room. It came from Mr. Harrington's pocket. The bulldog-faced banker frowned, pulling out his BlackBerry. He was old school. He trusted encrypted devices. "Apologies," he grunted. "Market alerts. Even on Christmas Eve. Money never sleeps." He glanced at the screen. Then he froze. The color drained from his face so rapidly that he looked like he was about to vomit. "Harrington?" Victoria asked, annoyed. "We are in the middle of a moment here." I have to take this," Harrington stammered. He stood up, knocking his chair over. He didn't bother to pick it up. He rushed to the corner of the room, his voice a frantic whisper into the phone. "What do you mean, pulled?" "All of it. That's impossible. That's $1 billion credit line." Richard lowered the ring box, confused. "What's going on?" Before he could answer, Beatrice's phone lit up on the table. Then Charlotte's. Then Richard's. It was a domino effect of digital panic. "What is this?" Beatrice whined, staring at her screen. "My Amex just got declined. I was trying to buy the flights to St. Bart's for New Year's, and it says, account frozen, suspected fraud." "Mine too," Charlotte said, frowning at an email. "Daddy just texted me. He says he's leaving." "Leaving?" Richard asked. "He's in the guest house." "No," Charlotte said, her voice trembling. "He's leaving the state. He says something toxic just touched the Sterling name, and he can't be near it. Richard, what did you do?" "I didn't do anything." Richard stood up. "Mother, what is happening?" Victoria was frantically tapping on her iPad. She pulled up the Bloomberg Terminal app. Her eyes widened in horror. "The stock," she whispered. "Sterling shipping. It's crashing in the Asian markets. It's down 40% in 10 minutes. 40%? Richard screamed. "That's a hostile takeover." "It's not a takeover," Harrington said, walking back to the table. He looked different now. The friendliness was gone. He looked at the Sterlings like they were radioactive. "It's an execution. Explain yourself, Harrington," Victoria commanded, trying to maintain her authority. "I just got off the phone with the risk management team at JP Morgan," Harrington said, his voice shaking. "And the syndicate desk at Goldman. Everyone just received the same call at the exact same time." "From who?" Richard demanded. "From Kincaid Industries," Harrington said. The room went silent. Even the fire seemed to stop crackling. Kincaid Industries wasn't just a company. It was an empire. Arthur Kincaid was a myth, a man who owned half of Manhattan, vast shipping lanes in the Pacific, and enough sovereign debt to bankrupt small countries. He was the shark that other sharks swam away from. "Kincaid?" Victoria scoffed, though her hand trembled on her wine glass. "We don't do business with Kincaid. We operate in different lanes. Why would Arthur Kincaid care about us?" "I don't know," Harrington said, grabbing his coat. "But he just flagged all Sterling assets as high risk. He pulled his guarantor backing from the North Atlantic merger." "He wasn't backing it," Richard argued. "The holding company behind the bank that was backing you is owned by Kincaid," Harrington shouted. "He owns everything, Richard, and he just called in every favor, every debt, and every marker he has. He explicitly told the street that anyone doing business with the Sterling family is an enemy of the Kincaid estate. Harrington looked at Charlotte. If I were you, Miss Kensington, I'd run. Your father knows what's coming. That's why he fled. Wait! Victoria shrieked as Harrington headed for the door. You can't leave. We have a contract. Sue me, Harrington spat. I'd rather be sued by you than hunted by Arthur Kincaid. He slammed the door. Beatrice started crying. Mum, the internet is down. The Wi-Fi just cut out. It's not just the Wi-Fi, Mum. The butler, a man named Jenkins, entered the room, looking pale. The power company. They've cut the line. They said there was an administrative error with the bill payment. On Christmas Eve? Victoria gasped. Suddenly the lights died. The massive crystal chandelier went dark. The fairy lights on the tree extinguished. The only light left came from the dying embers of the fireplace and the cold blue moonlight spilling in from the snow-covered windows. The heating vents groaned and stopped. The silence of the house was sudden and terrifying. My phone is dead too, Richard said, staring at his device. No signal. It says SOS only. This isn't a glitch, Charlotte whispered, backing away from Richard. This is a hit. Don't be ridiculous, Victoria hissed in the darkness. Who has the power to cut off our electricity, our bank accounts, and our stock price in 20 minutes? Who hates us that much? Richard stood there, the diamond ring still in his hand, useless and cold. A thought sparked in the back of his mind, a memory of Isabel, standing in the doorway just minutes ago. I hope the merger is worth it, Richard. No, Richard whispered. It can't be. What? Victoria snapped. Isabel, Richard said. She made a call. Isabel? Beatrice laughed through her tears. The maid? The librarian? Please, Richard. She's probably freezing to death at the bus stop right now. But Richard wasn't so sure. He remembered the look in her eyes. It wasn't the look of a defeated woman. It was the look of someone who had been holding back an avalanche and just decided to let go. Outside, a sound began to build, a rhythmic thwop-thwop-thwop that shook the snow from the trees. It grew louder, a roaring, mechanical beast descending from the sky. Is that a helicopter? Charlotte asked. They all rushed to the window. A massive black Sikorsky S-76 helicopter was landing on the front lawn, its searchlight blindingly bright, cutting through the darkness of their powerless estate. The wind from the rotors whipped the snow into a blizzard, burying the Rolls-Royce parked in the driveway. On the side of the helicopter, emblazoned in gold letters that shimmered even in the night, was a single logo, a stylized K, Kincaid. The door of the helicopter opened. 2 men in black tactical suits jumped out. They weren't police. They were private security. They marched up the steps of the mansion and pounded on the door. Jenkins, the butler, opened it with a trembling hand. One of the men stepped into the foyer, ignoring the stunned Sterling family huddled in the dark. He held out a sleek, black envelope. "Delivery for Richard Sterling," the man said. His voice was like a machine. Richard stepped forward, his legs feeling like jelly. I am Richard Sterling." The man shoved the envelope into Richard's chest. "You have been summoned 9 a.m. tomorrow. Kincaid Tower, Manhattan. If you are not there, the liquidation of your company becomes permanent." Who sent this?" Victoria asked, her voice barely a squeak. The man looked at her, his expression unreadable behind dark glasses. "Ms. Isabel Kincaid." The man turned and walked out. The helicopter roared, lifting off into the night, leaving the Sterling family standing in the cold, dark silence of their ruined Christmas. The private jet flight from Aspen to Teterboro was smooth, quiet, and filled with the kind of luxury Isabel had deliberately avoided for years. She sat in a leather recliner, sipping a cup of hot tea that a flight attendant had brought her, without her even asking. Across from her sat Arthur Kincaid. He was 65, with silver hair and eyes that looked like chipped flint. He wore a cashmere sweater and reading glasses, looking every bit the kindly grandfather, until you remembered he had just dismantled a 100-year-old shipping dynasty in the time it took to eat a mince pie. "You look thin, Izzy," he said gently. "I've been busy," Isabel said, looking out the window at the lights of Chicago passing below. "Trying to be a good wife." Arthur snorted. "To a sterling. I told you 3 years ago. New money acts like old money, but old money acts like gangsters. The sterlings are neither. They're just climbers, and climbers step on people." "I wanted to believe he loved me for me, Dad," Isabel said softly. "I didn't want the Kincaid baggage. I didn't want men looking at me and seeing a dollar sign." "So you became Isabel the Archivist?" Arthur nodded. "A noble experiment. And what did you learn?" Isabel turned to him. Her eyes were dry now. The sadness had hardened into something brittle and sharp. "I learned that without power, kindness is just begging." Arthur smiled. It was a terrifying smile. "That's my girl. Now about tomorrow. I've arranged a meeting. The lawyers have already drafted the acquisition papers. We're buying sterling shipping for pennies on the dollar." "No," Isabel said. Arthur paused. "No. I don't want to buy them out, Dad," Isabel said. "That's business. This is personal. If we buy them out, they walk away with millions. Maybe not what they wanted, but enough to live comfortably. Enough to go to St. Bart's and laugh about their close call." "What do you want, then?" "I want them to keep the company," Isabel said. "But I want to own them." Arthur took off his glasses. He leaned forward, intrigued. "Go on." The next morning, 8:55 a.m., Manhattan. The Sterling family looked like wrecks. They hadn't slept. They had scrambled to find a commercial flight out of Denver, after their private jet pilot informed them his contract was suspended. They were wearing the same clothes from the night before, wrinkled tuxedos and stained gowns, hidden under heavy coats. They stood in the lobby of Kincaid Tower, a glass monolith that pierced the sky in Midtown. The security guards didn't check their IDs, they just pointed to the private elevator. Victoria tried to fix her hair in the reflection of the elevator doors. "Listen to me," she hissed to Richard and Beatrice. "This is a misunderstanding. Arthur Kincaid probably didn't know Isabel was our domestic issue. We just need to explain that she's mentally unstable. We'll show him the fake photos if we have to." "Are you insane?" Richard whispered, his eyes bloodshot. "The man sent a paramilitary squad to our house. He knows who she is. She's his daughter, Mother. Isabel Kincaid. How did we miss this?" "Kincaid keeps his family out of the press," Beatrice moaned. "Everyone knows that. His daughter was supposed to be studying art in Florence or something. No one knew she was in Ohio." The elevator dinged. The doors opened directly into a penthouse office that occupied the entire top floor. The view of Central Park was breathtaking, but the room was freezing cold. Sitting behind a desk made of reclaimed black wood was Arthur Kincaid. He was reading a newspaper. He didn't look up. Standing by the window, looking out at the city, was a woman. She wore a white power suit that was tailored to within an inch of its life. Her hair was sleek, pulled back in a sharp chignon. She wore heels that clicked ominously on the marble floor. She turned around. It was Isabel. But it wasn't the Isabel who wiped flour off her cheeks. This woman radiated a terrifying elegance. "Please, sit," Isabel said. Her voice was calm, authoritative. She didn't offer them a drink. The Sterlings shuffled to the chairs. Victoria tried to muster some dignity. "Isabel," Victoria started, putting on a brave smile. Or should I say, Ms. Kincaid, this is all quite a dramatic turn of events. I'm sure we can— Quiet, Arthur said. He didn't shout. He just spoke the word, and it landed like a hammer. He finally looked up. You are here because my daughter has requested it. If it were up to me, you would currently be under investigation by the SEC for insider trading and fraud. I have the files ready to send. Richard paled. Fraud? Inflating asset values for the North Atlantic merger, Arthur said, tapping a folder. It's sloppy, Richard. Amateur. But, Isabel stepped forward, walking slowly toward the table where they sat. I asked my father to hold off on the federal charges. For now. Thank you, Richard exhaled, looking at her with a glimmer of hope. Isabel, I knew you still cared. Look, we can work this out. The divorce. We can tear up those papers. I had no idea about your family. If you had known, you would have loved me, Isabel asked. Is that it, Richard? You would have been the perfect husband if you knew I was worth $10 billion? Richard stammered, caught in his own greed. That's what I thought, Isabel said. She tossed a new document onto the desk. Here is the new deal. Victoria reached for it. What is this? It's not a divorce settlement, Isabel said. It's an employment contract. Employment? Beatrice asked. Kincaid Industries is acquiring a controlling stake in Sterling Shipping, effective immediately, Isabel explained. We are absorbing your debt. Your company survives. The Sterling name survives. Oh, thank God, Victoria slumped back. I knew reasonable minds would prevail. However, Isabel continued, her eyes hardening, the board of directors is being dissolved. There will be a new CEO appointed to oversee the restructuring. Who? Richard asked. Me, Isabel said. Richard blinked. You? But you're my wife. Not for long. The divorce will proceed, Isabel said. But as part of the restructuring deal to save your family from prison and bankruptcy, you three are going to work for me. Work? For you? Victoria looked like she had swallowed a lemon. Doing what? Consulting. Isabel smiled. It was the smile the wolf gives the sheep. No, Victoria. Not consulting. Isabel pointed to the corner of the office, where a small kitchenette was set up. My coffee is cold, Isabel said. And Richard? The floors in the lobby were looking a little scuffed when I walked in. I think there's a mop in the janitor's closet. You can't be serious. Richard stood up, his face red. You want us to be servants? I want you to understand, Isabel said, her voice dropping to a whisper that carried across the room. I want you to understand exactly how it feels to be small, to be overlooked, to be support staff. She checked her diamond-encrusted watch. You have 5 minutes to decide. Sign the contract and put on the uniforms, or my father calls the SEC and you all go to federal prison for 20 years. She looked at Victoria. Make me a coffee, Victoria. 2 sugars. And don't stir it too much. I hate the noise. It had been 3 weeks since the Christmas massacre, as the Wall Street Journal had quietly dubbed the acquisition of Sterling Shipping. The world moved on, but for the Sterling family, time had frozen into a repetitive loop of indignity. Richard Sterling, once the heir apparent to a billion-dollar fortune, was currently on his knees in the executive copy room on the 40th floor. The toner cartridge in the industrial printer had exploded. Blue dust coated his hands, his face, and the cheap polyester shirt he was now required to wear. Sterling, a voice barked from the hallway. It was Greg, the new operations manager. Greg used to work in the mailroom before Isabel promoted him. He enjoyed his new authority immensely. The Q4 reports for the Tokyo meeting are due in 10 minutes. Why is the printer jammed? It's the fuser, Richard stammered, wiping sweat from his forehead, leaving a blue smear across his brow. I'm trying to fix it. Try harder, Greg sneered, or I'm docking your pay. Again, you're already close to minimum wage, Richard. Do you want to be eating ramen for the rest of the month? Richard gritted his teeth. He wanted to scream. He wanted to throw the toner cartridge through the window, but he remembered the ankle monitor the federal agents had placed on him, a precautionary measure, while the SEC investigation was paused, pending his cooperation with the new management. He was trapped. Meanwhile, in the reception area, Victoria Sterling was learning that her lifelong skills of sipping tea and judging people were entirely useless in the real world. The phone at the front desk was ringing off the hook. "Sterling Shipping, please hold," Victoria said, her voice strained. She pressed a button. "Sterling Shipping, please hold." "Victoria." A sharp voice cut through the chaos. Victoria froze. She looked up to see Mrs. van der Hoeven standing at the desk. Mrs. van der Hoeven was the head of the Manhattan Charity League, a woman Victoria had lunched with every Tuesday for 20 years, a woman Victoria had once called tacky behind her back. Mrs. van der Hoeven wasn't looking at Victoria with recognition. She was looking at her with impatience. "I have a meeting with Ms. Kincaid," Mrs. van der Hoeven said, checking her Patek Philippe watch. "I'm not accustomed to waiting. And good heavens, are you the receptionist?" Victoria felt her face burn with a heat that rivaled the sun. She adjusted her headset, trying to hide behind the computer monitor. I'm assisting with transition logistics, Margaret." Margaret van der Hoeven peered closer, her eyes widening with gleeful malice. "Oh my, it is you. I heard the rumors, but I didn't believe it. Victoria Sterling, answering phones. It's temporary," Victoria lied, her voice trembling. "I'm sure it is," Margaret smirked. "Well, be a dare and tell Ms. Kincaid I'm here, and fetch me a sparkling water. No ice." Victoria stood up, her legs shaking. She had to walk past her old friend, go to the mini-fridge, get the water, and serve it. As she placed the bottle on the coaster, Margaret leaned in. "You missed the New Year's gala, Victoria," she whispered. "Everyone was talking about you. They say you lost the Aspen house. Is it true you're living in a rental?" "It's a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens," Victoria spat, unable to hold it in. "And it smells like boiled cabbage." Margaret laughed, a cruel, tinkling sound. "How quaint. Well, chop chop, Victoria. Ms. Kincaid is waiting." Inside the executive office, the atmosphere was entirely different. It was a war room of efficiency. Isabel sat at the head of the conference table. The walls were covered in digital displays showing shipping routes, fuel prices, and stock trends. She looked exhausted, but it was a good exhaustion, the kind born of purpose. "The Asian routes are stabilized," she said, pointing to a map. "By cutting the luxury overheads the Sterlings wasted money on, like the private jet leases and the corporate yacht, we've freed up capital to upgrade the actual fleet. Efficiency is up 15%. Arthur Kincaid sat in the corner, nursing a scotch, watching his daughter with pride. "You have a knack for this, Izzy. You cut the fat, but you kept the muscle." "I learned from watching the staff," Isabel said, not looking up from her tablet. "When you're invisible, you see everything. I saw where Richard wasted money. I saw which managers were actually working and which ones were just drinking coffee." The door opened. Beatrice walked in, carrying a tray of sandwiches. She was wearing a uniform that looked suspiciously like a maid's outfit, though Isabel had technically just mandated standard service staff attire. Beatrice looked like she had been crying. Again. "Lunch, Miss Kincaid," Beatrice mumbled, placing the tray down. Thank you, Beatrice, Isabel said, not making eye contact. Did you remember to remove the crusts? You know I dislike crusts. It's a texture thing. It was a petty demand, a direct mirror of the time Beatrice had made Isabel remake a salad 3 times because the lettuce wasn't crisp enough. Yes, Miss Kincaid, Beatrice whispered. Oh, and Beatrice, Isabel added, my dry cleaning is ready downstairs. Pick it up on your break and take the subway. Taxis are not a reimbursable expense for junior staff. Beatrice nodded and fled the room. Arthur chuckled. Enjoying yourself? Not really, Isabel sighed, leaning back. It's exhausting teaching them how to be human beings, but the company is safe. That's what matters. We've saved 3,000 jobs that Richard would have destroyed with his negligence. You've done more than that, Arthur said. You've made enemies. Dangerous ones. A cornered rat will bite Isabel. Never forget that. Isabel looked at the closed door. They have no teeth left, Dad. I pulled them all out. She was wrong. That evening, in the cramped, dimly lit living room of their Queen's apartment, the Sterling family held a council of war. The wallpaper was peeling, and the radiator clanked incessantly, a mocking soundtrack to their downfall. They were eating take-out pizza, the cheapest they could find. I can't do it anymore, Beatrice sobbed, looking at her broken fingernails. She made me clean the bathroom in the lobby today. The public one. Someone had missed. Shut up, Beatrice, Richard snapped. He was pacing the small room, nursing a cheap beer. We need a plan. We can't live like this. We signed the contracts, Victoria said from the worn-out armchair. She looked 10 years older. Her hair was undyed, revealing grey roots. If we quit, the immunity deal is void. Arthur Kincaid will have us arrested within the hour. There has to be a way out, Richard said. A loophole. Something. A knock on the door startled them. They froze. They didn't get visitors here. Richard moved to the door and peered through the peephole. He frowned, then unlocked the deadbolt. Charlotte Kensington stood in the hallway. She was wearing a trench coat and sunglasses, looking like a spy from a bad movie. She held a large designer bag close to her chest. Charlotte, Richard gasped. What are you doing here? If the press sees you in this neighborhood. Let me in, she hissed, pushing past him. It smells like despair in here. She walked into the living room and surveyed the fallen family with a mix of pity and disgust. I thought you fled to Europe, Victoria said, straightening her posture instinctively. I did, Charlotte said, placing her bag on the stained coffee table. Paris. But I got bored. And frankly, I'm angry. Isabel Kincaid humiliated me. She humiliated us all. Do you know what they're calling me in the tabloids? The runner-up. I am not a runner-up. What do you want, Charlotte? Richard asked. We have nothing left to give you. No ring. No merger. I don't want your money, Richard. I have plenty of my own, Charlotte said. She unzipped her bag and pulled out a thick stack of documents. I want revenge, and I brought ammunition. What is that? Victoria asked, leaning forward. My father hates Arthur Kincaid, Charlotte explained. They've been rivals since the 80s. When I told Daddy what happened, he dug into his private archives. Deep storage, stuff that isn't digital. She slapped the folder onto the pizza box. Kincaid Industries isn't as clean as they pretend. 20 years ago, Arthur Kincaid acquired a mining company in Peru. There were environmental issues. A village got sick. Kincaid buried the reports, paid off the local government. It's massive. If this gets out, Kincaid stock tanks. The SEC will be so busy tearing Arthur apart, they'll forget all about your little accounting errors. Richard picked up the papers. His eyes scanned the pages. This This is authentic? Signed affidavits? Originals. Charlotte smiled dangerously. But there's a catch. We can't just leak it to the press. Kincaid owns the press. He'll kill the story before it prints. So what do we do? Beatrice asked. We need to present it somewhere he can't silence us, Charlotte said. Somewhere public. Somewhere live. The Maritime Global Summit, Victoria whispered, her eyes lighting up with the old spark of scheming. Exactly, Charlotte nodded. It's in 3 days, at the Javits Center. Every major shipping CEO, news outlet, and government regulator will be there. Isabel is scheduled to give the keynote speech on ethical leadership. The irony, Richard muttered. We get into that summit, Charlotte plotted. We hack the teleprompter. We upload these documents to the main presentation screen right in the middle of her speech. We expose Kincaid as a monster in front of the entire world. The stock crashes, the board panics, and in the chaos, we make a move to retake the company. Victoria finished the thought. We claim we were coerced by a criminal enterprise. We position ourselves as the whistleblowers. It's risky, Richard said, his hands shaking. If Kincaid catches us. If we do nothing, you die in this apartment, Richard, Charlotte said coldly. Do you want to be a copy boy forever? Or do you want to be a king again? Richard looked around the dingy room. He looked at his mother's grey roots. He looked at the blue toner stain still on his hand. I'm in, Richard said. Good, Charlotte grinned. But we need an insider. Someone who has access to the AV room at the Javits Center. Someone who can bypass Kincaid's security detail. Victoria smiled. It was a terrifying, jagged smile. I know just the person, she said. The head of security at the Javits Center is an old friend of ours. Or rather, he owes me a favor. I covered up a gambling debt for his son 5 years ago. He hates Kincaid, too. Then it's settled, Charlotte said. Operation Ice Queen is a go. In 3 days, Isabel Kincaid falls. 2 days later. Isabel stood in her office, looking out at the skyline. She felt a strange unease. The Sterlings had been too quiet. Beatrice hadn't cried in 2 days. Richard had actually fixed the printer without complaint. Victoria had stopped accidentally disconnecting calls. Compliance was suspicious. Penny for your thoughts? Arthur asked, walking in. They're up to something, Isabel said. They're broken, Izzy, Arthur dismissed. You broke them. No, Isabel shook her head. I took their toys away. I didn't break their nature. A snake is still a snake, even if you put it in a cage. Her phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. Hello? Mrs. Sterling. Ms. Kincaid. A hushed voice on the other end. Who is this? It's Jenkins, the butler, from the Aspen house. Isabel paused. Jenkins had been kind to her. He used to sneak her chocolate when Victoria was on a rampage. Jenkins, are you okay? I'm fine, Mom. I found a new position in Connecticut. But I heard something. I still have friends in the Sterling circle. Drivers, maids. What did you hear, Jenkins? Miss Kensington is back in town, Jenkins whispered, and she was seen entering the Queen's apartment, late at night. And today Richard Sterling was seen meeting with a man named O'Malley at a diner in Hell's Kitchen. O'Malley is the security chief for the Maritime Summit. Isabel's grip tightened on the phone. The summit. They're going to hit the keynote. I don't know the details, Mom, but please, be careful. They are desperate people. Thank you, Jenkins. I won't forget this. Isabel hung up. She turned to Arthur. Her face was stone cold. They're going to try to sabotage the summit, she said. Arthur's face darkened. I'll have security pick them up now. No, Isabel said, raising a hand. If we stop them now, They'll just try again later. They'll play the victim. They'll say we silenced them. So what do? We let them try, Isabel said. We let them walk right into the trap. They want to make a scene in front of the whole world. Fine. I'll give them a show they'll never forget. She walked to her desk and opened her laptop. Dad, get me the file on Charlotte Kensington's father, the real file, the one about the offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Arthur smiled. And the Sterlings? I have something special for them, Isabel said. They think they have dirt on us? They have no idea what dirty laundry really looks like. The stage was set. The Maritime Global Summit would not just be a speech. It would be an execution. The Javits Center hummed with the energy of 3,000 delegates. The Maritime Global Summit was the biggest event of the year, and Isabel Kincaid stood at the podium, a vision in emerald green. High above in the darkened AV booth, Richard Sterling wiped sweat from his palms. Now, Richard hissed into his headset. Beside him, O'Malley, the bribed technician, hit enter. In the front row, Victoria and Charlotte smirked, waiting for the forged Peru report to blast onto the massive IMAX screens behind Isabel and destroy her career. The screens flickered, but the report didn't appear. Instead, a bank statement materialized, magnified 40 feet high. It was highlighted in red. Wire transfer. Senator Kensington to Sterling Offshore Holdings. Charlotte gasped, clutching her chest. That's my father's private account. Before the shock could settle, the image shifted to a high-definition video. It was unmistakably Richard, filmed 2 days prior in a diner, handing a thick envelope of cash to O'Malley. The audio boomed through the hall. Upload the fakes. If Kincaid goes down, we get the company back. The crowd gasped in unison. On stage, Isabel didn't flinch. She looked up at the booth, her gaze piercing the darkness. I told you, Richard, she said, her voice amplified and icy. Transparency is everything. She clicked a remote. The Peru documents were forged, but this footage, this is real. Cut the feed, Richard screamed, slamming his fists on the console, but the system was locked. Suddenly, the auditorium doors burst open. Federal agents, nobody move. Victoria tried to scramble over the VIP seats, screaming about her rights, but was handcuffed instantly. Charlotte sat frozen as agents surrounded her. High above, the Jumbotron showed Richard being tackled to the floor of the booth, his face pressed against the carpet. As the sobbing Sterlings were dragged out in disgraced silence, Isabel smoothed her lapel and turned back to the stunned audience. Now, she said calmly, shall we discuss the future? The applause was deafening. Exactly 1 year later, snow fell on Aspen, coating the long driveway in pristine white. But the Winter Palace was gone. In its place stood a sign carved from warm oak, the Kincaid Foundation for Children. Isabel stood on the balcony, where she had once been forbidden to stand. Below, the sound of laughter drifted up. The ballroom, once a place of silent judgment and cold dinners, was now filled with 50 foster children opening presents. Arthur Kincaid stepped out to join her, handing her a mug of hot cocoa. The lawyers called, he said softly. The auction of the Sterling fleet is complete. We bought the remaining assets this morning. Isabel nodded, watching the snow fall. And them? Victoria is adjusting to federal prison, Arthur replied with a grim satisfaction. She's working in the laundry unit. Apparently, she has quite a few complaints about the thread count. Isabel allowed herself a small smile. And Richard? Minimum security. He spent his time writing letters, apologies, begging for a job. Arthur looked at his daughter. Do you want to read them? No, Isabel said, her voice firm. Burn them. The sound of a car engine drew their attention. A modest SUV crunched up the driveway. It wasn't a limousine. It was Lucas, a pediatrician Isabel had met 3 months ago. He didn't know about the merger or the billions. He only knew that Isabel had the kindest eyes he'd ever seen. He waved, holding up a bottle of wine, a $10 blend, not a vintage reserve. "He's late," Arthur noted, hiding a smile. "He's perfect," Isabel corrected. She turned away from the cold view of the mountains. She had walked down those steps a year ago as a discarded servant, broken and alone. Today, she stood at the top as the owner of the world. She had taken their insults, their divorce papers, and their cruelty, and she had forged them into armor. "Coming, Dad?" Isabel asked, opening the door to the warmth inside. "Right behind you, boss," Arthur grinned. Isabel stepped inside, closing the door on the winter chill. The Sterlings were a memory, fading like footprints in fresh snow. But Isabel Kincaid? She was just getting started. The downfall of the Sterling family wasn't just a business transaction, it was a reckoning. They believed that wealth gave them the right to treat people like disposable objects. They mistook Isabel's silence for weakness and her kindness for stupidity. But as the old saying goes, the axe forgets, but the tree remembers. Isabel remembered everything. In the end, it wasn't her father's money that destroyed them. It was their own arrogance. They built a house of cards on a foundation of lies, and all it took was one gentle push from the woman they underestimated to bring it all crashing down. Justice, like winter, is inevitable. Wow, talk about a karma hit. What did you think of Isabel's revenge? Did the Sterlings get what they deserved, or was it too harsh? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story. Share this video with a friend who needs a reminder that you should never judge a book by its cover. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.